Live from the BDN Studios, it's Bang and Dang.
That's awesome.
If you don't like that, then
You ain't black.
Welcome back, battles, American Civil War, behind the battles. Back to kind of regularly scheduled programming. We're taking a look at behind the scenes, Secretary of War for the Union, and Lincoln's basically right-hand man, Edwin Stanton.
Mr. Stanton.
We all know he didn't get along with a lot of these generals.
This guy was a youngin' too.
He did some stuff even after the war with Sheridan and didn't like people. Yeah, so was criticized by many Union generals that said he was overcautious and a micromanager, which we already know these Union generals did not like, especially Grant. And that was the reason why, what's his name?
Halleck.
Oh, that was the reason why, what was it? I think it was John Reynolds. Yeah, because remember, they offered John Reynolds, and Reynolds was like, Lincoln was like, we can't guarantee we won't get involved. And he was like, nah, I don't want nothing to do with it.
Right.
So, yeah, it's Edwin Stanton. Well, before the war, though, ever reached the country's doorstep, Stanton's story had already been moving through the early American landscape. The paternal roots of the Stanton family stretched back to Massachusetts, carried by two Quaker lines, which were the Stantons and the Macys. Both of them, they eventually packed up and headed into North Carolina, chasing land, opportunity, and that Quaker sense of community that tied them together across generations, eating oatmeal. In the summer of 1774, Benjamin Stanton married Abigail Macy, bringing those two families into one. They built their life together through the last decades of the colonial era. But sadly, Benjamin, he passed away in 1800. That same year, Abigail made a decision that would shape the next branch of the Stanton family. She gathered up much of the family and left North Carolina behind for the Northwest Territory.
Ooh.
A bold move for a widow at the turn of the century. She made it with the confidence of someone who saw potential long before the maps were even finished. How would you even know to go out there?
Yeah, fuck that. Wow. Not long after she arrived, the territory became the new state of Ohio.
Okay, well, I guess I was thinking more along the lines of West.
Right.
Northwest Territory. Okay, never mind.
And Abigail Macy Stanton quickly proved to be one of the early developers of the young state. She bought a tract of land at Mount Pleasant directly from the government and settled her family right there, planting the roots that future generation would build on. One of her sons, David Stanton, grew into a physician in a growing town of Steubenville. While building his medical career, he married Lucy Norman, the daughter of a Virginia planter. Their marriage did not sit well with the local Quaker community. Lucy, she was a Methodist, not a Quaker. And at that time and place, that difference mattered. The community's backlash was so strong that David Stanton ultimately abandoned the Quaker faith altogether. Like, fuck you guys.
Right?
Wow. It was one of those quiet family moments that never makes headlines, but it shaped the world his children would inherit, including the son who would one day help guide the Union through its greatest trial. Edwin McMasters Stanton entered the world on a cold December day, the 19th to be exact, in 1814.
1814.
He was born in Steubenville, Ohio, the first of four children to David and Lucy Stanton. From the very start, his childhood took shape around books and quiet study. His early lessons came from a private school and a small seminary that sat behind the family's home. Oh, that's nice. A place locals called Old Academy. By the time he turned 10, he was moved into a school run by a Presbyterian minister. This was a shift that broadened his education, but also marked the years when his health first began to trouble him.
Damn, bud.
He was only 55 when he died.
That was during the time Stanton suffered his first asthma attack. It wasn't a mild condition either. The attacks could strike hard enough to shake him to the point of convulsion. And they followed him for the rest of his life.
How did they treat that back then?
Smoking herbal cigarettes, how that help? Made from plants like inhaling the smoke of other herbs and using early inhalers that often contained opium or other vapors. So they drug them.
Right. Kellogg's made asthma cigarettes. Fantastic.
While other boys ran the fields and played rough games, Stanton, he found refuge in reading and poetry.
He had no choice.
He attended Methodist church services and Sunday school every week. And at 13 years old, he became a full member of the Methodist Church, grounding himself in faith at a young age. I thought he went to Presbyterian. Thanks to David Stanton's medical practice, the family lived comfortably enough. But that stability vanished without warning in December of 1827 when David died suddenly at home.
Oh, what happened?
The loss broke more than the family's heart, stripped away their livelihood, and left them facing real hardship. Well, old Lucy, she met it head on. She opened a small store in the front room of their home, selling the medical supplies her husband had left behind, along with books, stationery, and groceries. Okay. Edwin, he had to leave school and went to work for a local bookseller to help keep the family afloat.
I mean, you gotta do what you gotta do.
You're the man of this house now, son.
All right. Even in those lean years, Stanton aimed for more. 1831, he entered Kenyon College, an Episcopal institution.
This guy's just all over the place.
And threw himself into campus life. He joined the Philomathecy and the Literary Society, serving on its committees and diving into debates and exercises. But money ran out just as he reached the end of his third semester. He was forced to get the hell out. His time at Kenyon still shaped him. He defended President Andrew Jackson during the nullification crisis, which was a stance that pulled him firmly toward the Democratic Party. He also embraced Episcopalianism and sharpened his revolution.
This guy doesn't know what he wants to be.
All right, and sharpened his revulsion.
Episcopalian,
Methodist,
Presbyterian,
wow.
Quaker.
Wow.
I guess his family already left the Quaker stuff, but.
All right, and he also sharpened his revulsion towards slavery. After leaving Kenyon, Stanton worked as a bookseller in Columbus, hoping to earn enough to return and finish his degree. The salary made that impossible, though. With no path back to college, he returned to Steubenville and took up the study of law.
There you go.
Setting the first stones of the career that would one day carry him into the storm of the Civil War.
By the mid-1830s, he was pushing hard toward a legal career. He studied law under Daniel Collier as preparation for the bar. In 1835, he was admitted to practice. With his credentials in hand, he joined a prominent law firm in Cadiz, Ohio, under Chauncey Dewey, one of the better-known attorneys in the region. Most of the firm's courtroom work ended up in Stanton's hand. They're like, we don't want to do none of this shit.
Right.
That gave him trial experience that would define him early in his professional years.
Look at that shit.
Stanton already taken an important step in his personal life. At 18, he met Mary Ann Lamson at Trinity Episcopal Church in Columbus, and they were engaged soon after. After buying a home in Cadiz, he returned to Columbus to be with her. All right. A couple hoped to be married at the Trinity Episcopal itself, but Stanton's recurrent illness made that impossible. Why? You're not allowed to marry when you got asthma or something?
Who knows?
Instead, the wedding took place at the residence of the church rector on December 31st, 1836. Hell of a New Year's party.
Right.
After the ceremony, Stanton traveled to Virginia, where his mother and sisters were living. Brought them back to Cadiz to live with him and his new wife.
Oh, that's good for him, right? Not long after his marriage, Stanton entered a new professional partnership with Benjamin Tappan, the lawyer and federal judge. The two families became tied even closer when Stanton's sister married Tappan's son. With these connections and his growing reputation, Stanton soon found himself securely placed within the Cadiz community. He became involved in the town's anti-slavery society and contributed to the local newspaper, the Sentinel. This is where he wrote and edited articles. His public life expanded further. In the year of 1837, he was elected prosecutor of Harrison County as a Democrat. His financial standing rose along with his responsibilities. Using his growing income, he purchased a large tract of land in Washington County and several additional pieces of property in Cadiz. All of it marked the beginning of a new life that he was building, both as an attorney and as a community figure. And this is long before the national politics ever called his name. 1838, Edwin Stanton's world widened again when Benjamin Tappan, his professional partner and now family connection, he's elected Senator of Ohio.
Look at that.
Tappan asked Stanton to take over the management of his law practice in Steubenville. And once Stanton's term as a county prosecutor ended, he returned to the town to handle those operations. His political involvement grew right alongside his legal responsibilities. 1840, Stanton served as a delegate at the Democrats' National Convention in Baltimore, and he even took an active role in Martin Van Buren's campaign for the presidency. The campaign ended in defeat, but Stanton's profound Democratic politics continued to rise. During these years, he was also active in the Masonic community, obviously. He belonged to Steubenville Freemasons, Lodge number 45. And after relocating to Pittsburgh, he became a charter member of the Washington Lodge number 253 on the 25th of March, 1852. He remained there until he resigned on the 29th of November, 1859.
Well, life at home brought both joy and heartbreak, as it usually does back then. Anywhere, any era, I guess. In Steubenville, Edwin and his wife Mary welcomed their first child, Lucy Lamson, in March 1840. Within months, the infant fell ill with an undiagnosed sickness. Stanton set aside his work and spent the entire summer at her bedside. Sadly, she died in 1841.
Damn.
2 years later, August 1842, their son Edwin Lamson Stanton was born. His arrival restored some of the happiness the family had lost. This boy, he grew strong and healthy, a sharp contrast to his sister's brief life, that's sure. But unfortunately, grief returned quickly. Mary Stanton was struck by a severe fever and never recovered. She died March of 1844, only 7 years after she and Edwin were married.
Damn.
Stanton's reaction, devastating, as you can imagine.
Right.
Historians Benjamin P. Thomas and Harold M. Hyman describe his sorrow so deep it nearly broke his sanity. He had Mary's burial clothes remade again and again, insisting she appear exactly as she had on their wedding day. Oh, like, he kept having them remake it until it looked right. And night after night, he wandered through the house with a lamp, tears on his face, calling out, "Where is Mary?"
Oh, jeez.
It was a period that reshaped him, leaving marks that never entirely faded. Wow. Can you imagine?
Wow. By the summer, after Mary's death, Edwin Stanton forced himself back into his work. One of the first major cases he took involved Caleb McNulty, a man Stanton had once called a glorious fellow.
What a glorious fellow.
McNulty, a fellow Democrat, had been clerk of the United States House of Representatives until he was dismissed by a unanimous vote, and he's charged with embezzlement.
Oh, not so glorious now.
Thousands of dollars belonging to the House had gone missing, and the political fallout, immediate. Democrats, terrified of the stain it would leave on their party. They're terrified of that stain. They pushed loudly for McNulty to be punished. Most people assumed his conviction was already settled. Tappan, well, he asked Stanton to take over McNulty's defense. Stanton stepped in and filed a motion calling for an indictment to be dismissed.
Oh.
He relied on a series of carefully calculated technicalities, each one precise, each one deliberate. The courtroom expected the motion to fail. Instead, to the surprise of nearly everybody, the judge, he granted it. All charges against McNulty dropped.
Somebody paid off that judge.
Newspapers across the country reported every detail of the scandal. Stanton's name suddenly appeared in headlines nationwide.
Uh-oh.
Wow.
After that affair, Stanton and Tappan ended their professional partnership, I bet.
Wow.
Stanton then formed a new one with a former student, George Wythe McCook. He's one of the well-known fighting McCooks that we've talked about several hundred times in our episodes. When the Mexican-American War began, men across the country rushed to enlist in the United States Army. And sure enough, McCook, he was one of them. Stanton might have joined as well, but his doctor warned that his asthma made military service too dangerous. He had throat spurs.
Right.
Well, that door closed, Stanton turned fully to his legal work. His practice had grown far beyond Ohio, stretching into Virginia and Pennsylvania. As his caseload expanded, Stanton realized Steubenville was no longer a large enough base for that kind of practice he envisioned.
Right.
And that's why we hinted earlier he went to Pittsburgh as the best place to anchor his growing legal operations. By late 1847, he'd been admitted to the bar there, setting the stage for the next major phase of old Stanton's career.
Ooh-wee. Well, while Stanton was in Pittsburgh, he built his practice around a new partnership. Charles Shaler was his new partner, a respected retired judge whose name carried weight all across Pennsylvania. At that very same time, he kept his collaboration with George Wythe McCook, who had returned to Steubenville.
Nice.
After serving in the Mexican-American War. With these two alliances in place, Stanton stepped directly into a high-profile litigation. One of the most significant was State of Pennsylvania versus Wheeling and Belmont Bridge Company.
No, jeez.
It's a landmark case before the United States Supreme Court. The fight centered on the Wheeling Suspension Bridge. At the time, the largest suspension bridge in the world, and a major link along the National Road. Its center span rose about 90 feet above the water, which might have seemed impressive to engineers, but it was a problem for steamboats with tall smokestacks. If those boats could not pass, then river traffic and valuable trade it carried would be redirected to Wheeling, which is in West Virginia, which in that era was still part of Virginia. Yes.
Right. Not West Virginia yet.
No.
Yeah, August 16th, 1849, Stanton appeared before the Supreme Court and urged the justices to enjoin the bridge company. He argued that the obstruction damaged Pennsylvania by diverting commerce and blocking navigation.
Clearly.
Associate Justice R.C. Greer, he told those affected to seek relief in a lower court, but left an opening for Stanton to file for an injunction in the Supreme Court itself, which obviously he quickly did.
Right.
Oral arguments began February 25th, 1850, the same day Stanton was admitted to practice before the court. Look at that. The bridge company insisted the court lacked jurisdiction, but the justices rejected that time. He said, you're coming through here, bud.
Right.
When the case moved forward, Stanton delivered a dramatic demonstration that newspapers across the country seized on. He arranged for the steamer Hibernia to drive its 85-foot smokestack straight into the bridge, tearing off part of the stack and damaging the structure. A very public illustration of the obstruction he had described, and it was only 85 foot, and the bridge was 90, so...
Jeez.
Probably at the peak, so he was like, you gotta go to the left or a little bit.
Wow. In May of 1850, the case referred to Reuben H. Walworth, the former Chancellor of New York. February of 1851, Walworth issued a forceful opinion declaring Wheeling Bridge an unlawful obstruction that must either be removed or raised high enough to allow normal river traffic to pass. I mean, common sense. The Supreme Court said, we agree. In May of 1852, by a vote of 7-2, the court ordered the bridge height increased to 111 feet. Wheeling and Belmont refused to accept the ruling and turned to Congress. The Stanton shot Congress passed a bill declaring the bridge lawful.
Oh.
Wow. President Fillmore signed it on the 31st of August, effectively overturning the Supreme Court's decision.
You can't do that. What do you think he is, Trump?
Right. Stanton was angered by what he saw was a blow to the court's fundamental purpose. In his view, Congress had undermined the nation's primary means of resolving disputes between states through peaceful legal judgment.
200 years later.
That's what the fucking Supreme Court's about, right?
That's the highest level. Mm-hmm. Stanton's dramatic victory in the Wheeling Bridge case had immediate consequences for his career. Huh. His name now carried national weight, and soon he was being called into other major legal battles. One of the most important was the McCormick Reaper patent case involving inventor Cyrus McCormick.
He's the guy that makes the seasoning?
Seasoning? With Carolina Reapers?
Right.
Back in 1831, the young McCormick had built a mechanical reaper that transformed the harvesting of grain. Well, okay. The machine became indispensable across the expanding wheat fields of the western United States, and demand for it freaking popped through the roofs, popped through the bridge that was only 90 foot tall. With the demand came competition, especially from another inventor and businessman, John Henry Manny. By 1854, McCormick decided to strike back. With two prominent lawyers, Reverdy Johnson and Edward Dickinson, he filed suit accusing Manny of violating his patents and demanded an injunction to stop the use of Manny's reaper. A patent only means you can't make it exactly how it is.
Right. Well, Manny, he did not arrive unprepared, no. He hired George Harding and Peter Watson, both respected attorneys. The case was first scheduled to be heard in Chicago, and Harding and Watson wanted a local lawyer to join their team. Well, guess what that lawyer's name was? Abraham Lincoln.
You thought we were going to say Edwin Stanton. Like, wait.
When Watson traveled to Springfield to meet Lincoln, his first impression was not encouraging at all. But as they spoke, he warmed to Lincoln's manner, and he believed that he could be valuable to the defense. That possibly vanished when the court moved the proceedings from Chicago to Cincinnati. With no need for a Chicago-based attorney, Harding and Watson pursued their original preference, Edwin Stanton. No one even informed old Abe that he had been replaced. Abraham, he arrived in Cincinnati with his arguments prepared, unaware that his services were no longer required. Jeez, poor guy. Stanton's reaction to Lincoln was immediate, unmistakably cold. He made it clear that he did not want Lincoln involved and did his best to push him into the margins.
He was going to be involved anyways.
The case went forward with Harding, Watson, and Stanton as Manny's active defenders. And old Abe, he did not even participate in the planning or the arguments. He remained in Cincinnati only as a spectator, watching the proceedings from the sidelines while Stanton stepped into another moment that would shape his rise in national reputation. Inside the Manny legal team, Edwin Stanton served as the chief researcher. He never even pretended to have George Harding's technical mastery of patent science, but he threw himself into the jurisprudence, gathering past rulings and stitching together the legal framework the defense needed. I mean, that's all you need to do. To win McCormick versus Manny, the trio had to convince the court that Cyrus McCormick did not hold exclusive rights to the reaper's divider. The arm on the far end of the cutter bar that separated grain from the uncut stalks was not what he did. every harvesting machine needed a divider to function. So, and the defense knew that if they could show the device existed before McCormick's patent, the case would collapse. I mean, it had to have.
Peter Watson decided that a legal argument alone might not be enough, so he turned to strategy. He hired a model maker named William Wood with instructions to locate an older version of McCormick's Reaper. Mm-hmm. Wood did find one in Virginia that had been built in 1844, 1 year before McCormick secured his patent. Mm. Wood then had a blacksmith straighten the machine's curved divider, knowing that Manny's Reaper used a curved divider as well. If McCormick's appeared with a straight one, there would be no conflict. To hide the blacksmith's work, Wood treated the altered... Oh, they're going to fake one?
Yeah.
Wood treated the altered metal with a salt and vinegar solution, giving it a coat of rust that made the modification look as old as the rest of the machine. Wow. That's what those tip for you guys. You guys ever seen those restoration channels on YouTube?
Yeah.
They're restoring old shit. That's exactly what they're doing right there. When the Reaper arrived in Cincinnati, Stanton examined it and immediately understood what it meant. If the court accepted it as authentic, the case was effectively won.
Right.
Arguments began September of 1855. In March of 56, Justices John McLean and Thomas Drummond, they delivered their decision. They ruled in favor of John Manny. McCormick appealed to the Supreme Court, turning McCormick and Manny into a national political matter.
All right.
Debates surrounding the case soon reached the floor of Congress. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's some dirty shit, dude.
Yeah, it's rough. Years later, during the Civil War, Stanton remembered the loyalty and resourcefulness William P. Wood had shown during the Reaper case. And this is when Stanton held national authority. He appointed Wood superintendent of the military prisons in the District of Columbia. This is a post that placed him squarely inside the machinery of war. February of 1856, Edwin Stanton became engaged to Helen Hutchinson. She was just 16 years younger than he was. She belonged to a prominent Washington family. Her daddy, Lewis Hutchinson, he was a wealthy merchant and warehouseman, and a descendant of Meriwether Lewis. Oh. The couple married on the 25th of June, 1856, at the Hutchinson family home. And after that very wedding, Stanton moved to Washington, convinced that work of real importance awaited him before the Supreme Court.
His rise at the Capitol began with a relationship he had built years earlier. That's while he was working in Pennsylvania. He formed a close friendship with Jeremiah Black, who was chief judge of the state Supreme Court. That connection paid off when James Buchanan, sworn in as president, he appointed Black attorney general. Black's arrival in Washington quickly brought him a major legal problem, just like the Blacks arrived.
Right.
The federal government was facing a challenge over California land claims.
Oh, jeez.
Under the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which ended the Mexican-American War, the United States had agreed to honor valid land grants issued by Mexican authorities.
Oh.
Why? Congress followed up with the California Land Claims Act of 1851, creating a board to evaluate the titles. One of the most sweeping claims came from Joseph Yves Lemantour. He was a French-born merchant who insisted he owned enormous stretches of California soil, which included a large portion of San Francisco. Can't have a Frenchman having that. When the land commissioners accepted his claims, the United States government appealed. They said, no, I don't think so.
No. At that very moment, Black received a letter from Auguste Joanne, who claimed that Lemantour's titles were fraudulent, which they probably were, and that he himself had forged a date on one of their approved grants while working for Lemantour.
Oh.
It was the kind of explosive allegation that demanded swift action from someone trusted by the administration.
So did anybody find out if that fucking, how do we know that machine from earlier, right. I'm still on that, how do they know that machine from earlier was rigged? They don't. Whatever happened with that?
It's just done with.
Jeez.
Black needed a loyal Democrat. You never find one of those. A capable lawyer.
Maybe back then.
And someone who could represent the Buchanan administration's interests in California with absolute reliability. And guess who he chose? You guessed
Abraham
it.
Lincoln.
Oh, Edwin Stanton. With this assignment, Stanton entered the highest levels of Washington legal and political life, beginning the path that would eventually carry him into the center of the national storm. Ellen Stanton wanted nothing to do with her husband's California assignment.
She's like, hell no.
If old Edwin accepted, he would be thousands of miles away for months, leaving her alone in Washington with almost no friends or family. Well, the timing made it worse because on the 9th of May, 1857, she gave birth to their daughter, Eleanor. After delivery, Ellen, she fell seriously ill. The ordeal frightened Stanton so much it kept him from committing to California.
She faked it because she knew what happened to him first time.
And by October 1857, with Ellen recovering, Stanton finally agreed to represent the Buchanan administration in the land claims battle. His compensation, $25,000, a sum equivalent to $700,000.
Nice.
On February 19th, 1858, Stanton boarded the Star of the West in New York City.
I had to go all the way around fucking underneath South America, dude.
Crazy.
Ignorant.
Traveling with him were his young son, Eddie, James Buchanan III, the president's nephew, Lieutenant H.N. Harrison of the Navy. They're all signed to accompany Stanton.
Okay. The voyage was rough.
Yeah.
Storms battered the ship until it reached Kingston, Jamaica, man. Slavery was outlawed there.
Oh.
And Stanton found the climate and the culture unexpectedly pleasant. Yeah, they're all high.
Right.
He was especially struck when he attended a church service and saw black and white congregants sitting together.
Fantastic.
Something you'd never dreamt of witnessing in the United States.
Mm-mm.
From Jamaica, the group traveled to Panama, where they boarded the Sonora, which was a ship 3 times larger than the one that had carried them from New York. March 19th, they finally reached San Fran and took rooms at the International Hotel. Stanton, he began his work immediately. Joined by his party and 2 clerks, he plunged into the chaotic record-keeping left from California's Mexican era. They're like, what records? Right. Among the archives, he discovered the Jamino Index, which listed land grants up to 1844. With help from a congressional act, Stanton gathered documents from across the state, assembling a comprehensive record of Mexican grants. Took months of work to put the pieces in order.
I bet it did. Wow, his arrival in California, it was noticed. And it wasn't noticed very kindly. Many locals feared that Stanton's investigation would overturn their land claims. Rumors and insults began to circulate almost immediately. At the very same time, President Buchanan and Senator Stephen Douglas, they were fighting for political influence in the state. And old Stanton found himself caught between them. Supporters of Douglas launched a smear campaign against him. The attacks frustrated and saddened Stanton at the same time. But they did little to slow the steady march of his work. Joseph Limitor had constructed what looked, at first glance, like a powerful case. He arrived with an impressive stack of evidence that seemed legitimate. Witness testimony, official-looking land grants.
Yeah, of course he's going to have witness testimony because
right.
They know if he loses, they're all screwed.
Right. He had official-looking land grants bearing the signature of Emmanuel Micheltorena, the former Mexican governor of California. He had paperwork stamped with what appeared to be a genuine Mexican government seal. And to many observers, it looked like Limitor's claims just might hold up. But Stanton had Auguste Joan.
Yep.
According to Joan, Limitor had obtained dozens of blank documents already signed by Governor Micheltorena. With those in hand, Limitor could fill in whatever details he wished, creating land titles out of thin air. Joan also admitted that he once bored a hole in one of the documents in order to erase something. And that same hole was still visible in the paper Limitor presented as evidence. Oh. Stanton gathered even more damaging material, including letters that plainly described the fraud in 2 custom stamps, one genuine and the other counterfeit. The fake stamp had been used 11 times. Each instance, guess what? They appeared on Limitor's grants. This guy's a piece of shit.
Well,
right.
So's the guy that had a fucking false machine.
Right.
When Stanton contacted the Mexican Minister of Exterior in Mexico City, officials there they found no record supporting Limitor's claims. By late 1858, the California Land Commission rejected his petition entirely. He was then arrested for perjury and posted $35,000 bail and fled the country.
I bet he fucking did.
Get the hell out of there.
Wow.
As the year ended, Stanton prepared to return to home. A new worry hit him. His son, Eddie, he fell ill. Each time Stanton made plans to leave California, Eddie's condition worsened. Now he's faking it. He was like, I don't want to stay in this.
Right.
Palm trees and bitches and bikinis.
Wow.
All the while, Stanton wrote to Ellen as often as he could, though her letters grew more distressed. Alone in Washington, that's a movie, with her young daughter, Ellie, she accused him of abandoning her in a lonely city while he chased work on a far side of the continent.
Senor Duck.
January 3rd, 1859, Stanton and his party, they finally departed San Fran. They got multicolored flags and fucking crop top shirts.
Right.
They reached home in early February. Back in the capital, Stanton resumed advising President Buchanan on patronage and assisting Attorney General Black to such a degree that people sometimes mistook him for an assistant attorney general.
Oh.
Yet, Washington seemed dull after the turbulence he had faced in California, at least until the next storm arrived. And this one was built around a man whose name was already turned into a national spectacle. We've heard of him.
Yep.
Daniel Sickles served in New York in the United States House of Representatives, and his personal life soon placed him at the center of one of the most sensational scandals the country ever seen. You see, he was married to Teresa Bagioli Sickles, daughter of composer Antonio Bagioli. Their marriage publicly appeared respectable. But then on Teresa, she began an affair with Philip Barton-Key.
You never trust a Teresa without H.
Right. And Barton-Key, he actually was the United States Attorney General. Not the general, just the attorney for the District of Columbia. He also happened to be the son of Francis Scott Key, who you guys might know as the author of the old Star-Spangled Banner.
Oh, my.
So that's some high-profile shit we're talking here.
Oh, wow. It was a Sunday, February 27th, 1859. Sickles confronted Key in Lafayette Square. Witnesses heard him shout, "Key, you scoundrel! You have dishonored my home. You must die." And this is right before shooting Key to death. After the killing, Sickles walked directly to the home of Attorney General Jeremiah Black, confessed to the crime and surrendered. He claimed insanity. A grand jury indicted him for the moida. The sensational nature of the act and the fact that it took place almost in the sight of the White House made the case national news. Newspapers soon spun new layers of the scandal, even speculating that Sickles' political standing had grown because of his wife supposedly having an affair with President James Buchanan.
Oh, geez. The press, even back then, huh?
Wow.
Sickles, he assembled a formidable legal team. Prominent criminal attorney James Brady and his partner John Graham took charge of the defense. And guess who they invited? Old Edwin to join them.
Damn right.
Arguments opened April 4th. The prosecution attempted to argue that Sickles himself had committed adultery and cared little for his wife, which if you listen to our Sickles episode, he was taking chicks to go meet the fucking Queen of England and shit.
Yeah.
Well, the judge, he didn't care. He blocked that strategy. He said, we're not going to talk about Sickles' adultery here, okay?
No.
They shifted to portraying Sickles' shooting of Key as a cold-blooded murder then. The defense then introduced a bold claim. They argued that Sickles was temporarily insane at the moment he pulled the trigger, a crime of passion, they say. Became the first successful temporary insanity plea in American legal history.
Wow. The trial itself was filled with theatrics. Stanton's closing arguments electrified the courtroom. He spoke of marriage as a sacred bond and argued that a man had the right to defend that bond when it was violated. When he finished, the courtroom erupted in cheers. One law student later described Stanton's rhetoric as a sweeping Victorian sermon on the sanctity of the family. The jury deliberated for about an hour before returning with a verdict of not guilty. The judge said, "Sickles, go home, bud." Outside the courthouse, Sickles, Stanton, and the rest of the defense team, they were greeted by cheering crowds that were celebrating the victory. Oh, wow.
Oh, jeez.
Wow.
Well, now, after that's out of the way, during the 1860 presidential election, Edwin, he supported Vice President John Breckinridge. Wow.
He's a Democrat.
That's true. Stanton's years inside the Buchanan administration and his belief that only Breckinridge could hold the country together guided his choice. Privately, though, he assumed Abraham Lincoln would win,
Right.
but he still believed a Breckinridge victory offered the last chance to avoid a national rupture. As the winter approached, the administration entered a crisis. James Buchanan began preparing his annual State of the Union message, and he asked Attorney General Jeremiah Black for advice on the legality of secession. Black turned to Stanton. Stanton approved a forceful draft that declared secession unconstitutional.
Oh.
Buchanan, he delivered that address to Congress December 3rd and said, you guys better fucking not.
Right. David, inside the cabinet, resentment toward Buchanan grew, and it grew quickly. Members felt he was too passive as the southern states edged towards disunion. 5th of December, Treasury Secretary Howell Cobb, he said, "I'm out." 4 days later, 9th of December, Secretary of State Lewis Cass, he said, "I'm out."
Lewis Cass. You guys know who Lewis Cass is? If you're from Michigan, you know who Lewis Cass is.
He was frustrated by Buchanan's refusal to defend federal authority in the South.
He was also a longtime governor of the territory of Michigan, by the way.
And the 12th of December, Buchanan nominated Black to replace Cass. And around a week later, Stanton was in Cincinnati when word arrived that the Senate had confirmed him as the Attorney General.
He's like, I didn't even ask for it, but hey.
Look at that shit. You know, I guess I go back to Washington, and he was sworn in on the 20th of December, 1860.
Unfortunately, he entered a cabinet that was in turmoil.
A country that was in turmoil.
Buchanan, fearful of provoking the South, sympathized with many of his grievances and refused to take firm action. He said, I'm getting out anyways.
Right.
Or wait. Yeah, he can't run again.
He's like, what's the matter? I won't be here anyway.
Right. December 9th, he promised a delegation of South Carolina congressmen that federal military positions in the state would not be reinforced unless they were attacked.
Right.
But December 20th, the very day Stanton took office, Major Robert Anderson moved his small command from Fort Moultrie to Fort Sumter.
Oh.
Southerners, they saw this as a betrayal of Buchanan's promise.
They did.
South Carolina immediately issued an ordinance of secession soon afterwards. It can't be both.
Right.
It can't be immediate and soon after. South Carolina then issued an ordinance of secession soon after, declaring itself independent of the United States of America.
Are we done?
State leaders demanded the evacuation of all federal forces from Charleston Harbor, then threatened bloodshed if their demands were ignored, which they would follow through with.
The very next day, Buchanan presented his cabinet with a draft response. Secretaries Jacob Thompson and Philip Francis Thomas thought the document was too aggressive. Stanton, Black, and Postmaster General Joseph Holt, they believed that it went too far in the opposite direction and gave away way too much.
Yeah.
Only Isaac Toucey, Secretary of the Navy, supported Buchanan's proposed wording. The division reflected the growing national fracture Stanton now found himself trying to navigate from inside the president's own council. Oh, Edwin, he grew increasingly unsettled by President Buchanan's reluctance to confront the escalating crisis in South Carolina. He believed the president was drifting towards surrendering to the Southern demands, and he dedicated himself to stiffening Buchanan's resolve. And on 30th of December, Attorney General Jeremiah Black, he visited Stanton at his home. The two men agreed to write a formal objection to any order withdrawing federal troops from Fort Sumter. They also agreed that if Buchanan issued such an order, both of them, along with Postmaster General Joseph Holt, they would resign. We don't want no part of this. Their departure would cripple the administration. Faced with that very threat, Buchanan, he said,
Damn it.
I'm going to back away from this. Well, New Year's Eve, 1860, South Carolina's delegates received the president's decision. Federal troops would not, now repeat, would not be withdrawn from Charleston Harbor.
And then crisis, it only widens. February 1st, 6 additional southern states, they say we're leaving too. February 18th, Jefferson Davis, he becomes president of the Confederate States. Up in Washington, the atmosphere turned electric with rumor. Talk of conspiracies and attempted coups spread through the Capitol. Stanton believed that violence might erupt February 13th, the day the Congress counted the electoral votes, but nothing happened. He feared unrest again on March 4th when Lincoln would take the oath of office, yet that day too passed without trouble.
Oh, wow.
Lincoln's inauguration stirred a fragile sense of hope in Stanton. The new president made it clear in his address that he did not intend to abolish slavery throughout the nation, but he stated firmly that secession was unlawful and that the Union was perpetual.
Right.
For Stanton, who had fought to keep Fort Sumter defended, Lincoln's words suggested the government might finally take a frickin' stand against these Southern aggressors.
Right.
March 5th, Lincoln submitted his cabinet choices to the Senate. By the end of the day, Stanton, he was no longer Attorney General. Even so, he remained in his office for a short time to help guide his successor, Edward Bates, through the transition.
Okay.
It was a quiet exit from the Buchanan administration, but the storm that would soon pull Stanton back, just when I think I'm out.
Right.
It would pull him back into national power was already gathering beyond the horizon.
21st of July, the North and South met in their first major collision at Manassas Junction, which is commonly known as the First Battle of Bull Run. Many in the North believed this opening clash would crush the Confederacy and end the war in a single stroke. Instead, the fighting turned into a bloody and chaotic struggle that ended with the Union Army falling back in a disorderly retreat back to Washington. The shock was immediate. Northerners quickly realized the conflict would be far harder and far longer than they had imagined. I mean, this shit's real. President Lincoln responded by calling for more troops, and the country answered. 250,000 plus men enlisted and said, let's do this shit. But the old federal government lacked the supplies needed to equip them. Like, sure.
Right.
We got enough for about 50,000 of you guys. To solve that very problem, the War Department told states to purchase equipment themselves and promise reimbursement. The plan opened the doors to fraud.
Obviously.
States bought broken, inferior, or useless items and resold them to the government at inflated prices. Desperate to outfit the new recruits, the government purchased the goods anyway.
Didn't have a choice.
Wow.
Well, it didn't take long for the blame to settle on the Secretary of War, Simon Cameron. Rumors spread. Rumors flew. He was mismanaging the department, and the calls for his resignation grew. Cameron then turned to Edwin Stanton for help, seeking advice on legal issues tied to the department's contracts and purchases. Cameron's situation worsened in November of 1861 after Colonel John Cochrane delivered a fiery speech to his regiment. Cochrane declared that Union forces should, quote-unquote, take the slave by the hand, place a musket in it, and bid him in God's name strike for the liberty of the human race. Too soon, guy.
Right.
Cameron endorsed the idea of arming enslaved people. Reaction inside the cabinet was swift and negative.
Oh.
Caleb B. Smith, Secretary of the Interior, he rebuked Cameron sharply for supporting Cochrane's position. What are you doing, guy?
Right. Wow. Well, the controversy deepened the sense that Cameron no longer had control of his department. And as the pressure mounted, Edwin Stanton's name began to surface as a potential successor. There was a shift that would soon reshape the entire Union war effort. As the controversy around Simon Cameron grew, he took an even bolder step. An annual report he prepared for Congress, which was to accompany President Lincoln's message. Cameron inserted a direct call to arm enslaved people. He handed the draft to Edwin Stanton for review, and Stanton strengthened it even further. He added language declaring that anyone who rebelled against the United States forfeited any claim to property, including enslaved people, and that the federal government had clearly the right to arm slaves when it may become necessary, as it is to use gunpowder or guns taken from the enemy.
Well, I mean, I guess when you're still looking at humans as property.
Right.
Cameron, he delivered the report to Lincoln and then sent copies to both Congress and the press. Lincoln reacted sharply. He ordered all portions calling for the armament of enslaved people be removed and that the document be recalled and replaced with a revised version. Congress received the altered report. The press, however, they already received the unedited version. When newspapers published the full document, Lincoln found himself under fire. Many Republicans accused him of weakness on slavery and resented that he had tried to erase the call to arm enslaved people.
Oh, wow.
Can't win, bud.
No. Wow, the backlash forced Lincoln to act, and act fast. Once the abolitionist anger settled, he decided that Cameron, you gotta go. What?
You gotta go.
Right. Cameron refused.
But I want to arm the slaves.
I know. Cameron refused to resign until he secured a face-saving arrangement. He said, I gotta look good going out, boys. A vacancy emerged in the post of minister to Russia.
He said, send me to the tundras.
Right. And he and Lincoln agreed that Cameron would step into that diplomatic role after leaving the cabinet. Look at that. The question then became, who's going to replace him? Lincoln favored Joseph Holt. But Secretary of State William Seward, he said, no, I think Edwin Stanton would be a good choice. Salmon Chase, Secretary of Treasury, Stanton's friend, he agreed with Seward. And at that very time, Stanton was preparing to enter a legal partnership with Samuel Barlow in New York. When word reached him that he might be nominated as Secretary of War, he dropped those plans immediately.
He said, hell yeah.
All right. 13th January, Lincoln nominated Edwin Stanton to lead the War Department. 2 days later, the Senate said, okay. A new figure now stood at the center of the Union war effort, and the direction of the conflict would soon shift under his hand.
Yeah, by the time he took charge, the War Department carried a reputation so bad that soldiers and politicians alike called it the lunatic asylum.
Oh, wow.
Under Cameron, the department's authority had been ignored, its operations ridiculed, and its influence overshadowed by the Army's generals. Commanders in the field held most of the real power, while the President and the War Department stepped in only when absolutely necessary. Yeah, you can't let the inmates run the asylum. I don't care if they're generals or not.
Right.
Relations with Congress were equally strained. Representative John Fox Potter, chair of the House, on House Committee on Loyalty of Federal Employees, he wanted Cameron to remove about 50 suspected Confederate sympathizers from government posts.
Oh.
Cameron ignored him completely.
Yeah.
Stanton, for his part, he was shorted up. He was sworn in January 20th, and he wasted no time. On his first day, Stanton summoned Potter and began repairing the broken relationship between Congress and the War Department. That same day, he dismissed 4 individuals Potter had identified as disloyal. It was far fewer than the 50 Potter wanted, but it marked a dramatic change in tone.
I'd say so, 4 or 50.
And Potter left the meeting satisfied that the new secretary intended to act. He's like, finally, somebody is going to do something.
Right. Wow. Stanton also opened a line of cooperation with Senator Benjamin Wade and the Joint Committee on the Conduct of the War. The committee possessed subpoena power, allowing it to gather info that even the War Department could not easily obtain. The War Department's able to get whatever the fuck they want.
You would think.
It could also help Stanton remove untrustworthy or incompetent staff. Wade and his committee soon became frequent and valuable allies. Inside the department, Stanton reorganized aggressively. He appointed John Tucker, an executive from Philadelphia and Reading Railroad.
Reading Railroad.
And he also had Peter Watson, which is his colleague from the Reaper case, as assistant secretaries. He expanded the department's workforce by more than 60 employees, filling those offices with the personnel required to run a war of unprecedented scale.
He also took aim at a long-standing abuse. He appealed to the Senate to halt all military appointments until he could review more than 1,400 pending promotions. Up to that point, promotions in the Army had largely followed the spoil system, rewarding political loyalty instead of competence. Stanton ended that practice immediately. Merit, not favoritism, would guide advancement in the Union Army. In just 10 days, the department, once mocked as a madhouse, was beginning to show signs of order, discipline, and purpose under its new secretary. January 29th, Stanton issued one of his first major directives of Secretary of War. He ordered that every federal contract for military materials and supplies with foreign manufacturers be canceled and replaced with contracts inside the United States. No future foreign contracts were to be made. The decision sent unease rippling through Lincoln's cabinet, though. Both the UK and France were already searching for a reason to recognize and potentially support the Confederacy.
Yes, they were.
And now Stanton's sudden order seemed like it might hand them that justification.
France was looking more than the UK was, but...
Secretary of State William Seward warned that the move would complicate the foreign situation, but Stanton, he stood firm.
At that very same time, he set out to build a reliable transportation and communication system across all the North. The Union war effort depended on that. Stanton, he focused heavily on railroads and telegraphs. Working with Senator Benjamin Wade, he pushed a bill through Congress that granted the administration explicit authority to seize railroad and telegraph lines when necessary for the war. Ooh, really? We got to piss off the railroad guys, huh? Northern rail companies were largely cooperative, so the law was rarely invoked. Right. But it gave Stanton the power he needed.
If he needed it.
Right. He then consolidated control over military communications. He moved the Army's telegraph operations from General George McClellan's headquarters into the War Department.
Why wasn't it there in the first place?
Right. McClellan, he resented the shift. But it gave Stanton direct oversight of battlefield information. Well, not like McClellan was doing anything.
Right.
He tightened control even further by forcing all members of the press to route their requests through Assistant Secretary Peter Watson. If reporters tried to obtain info through any other part of the department, Stanton had them threatened with charges of espionage.
Let's show the narrative there. Before he took office, though, before Stanton took office, President Lincoln had divided internal security responsibilities among several cabinet members, especially Seward, because he did not trust Attorney General Bates or former Secretary Cameron to handle the task. Stanton, he changed the system entirely. Under him, the War Department consolidated responsibility for internal security. Seward's approach relied heavily on arbitrary arrests and detentions, a practice Democrats denounced. Lincoln defended it, arguing that his first duty was to safeguard the government itself, and that waited until disloyal individuals committed open acts of treachery could lead to disaster. Nip it in the bud.
Right.
Stanton, he agreed with Lincoln. At his urging, Seward continued holding only the most dangerous prisoners and released the rest, narrowing but maintaining the policy of preventive detention. It was one more step in the tightening of Union command as the war entered its hardest years.
By early 1862, old Lincoln, he had grown weary of General George McClellan's refusal to even act. Lincoln's General War Order No. 1, issued on the 27th of January, called for a coordinated advance against Confederate forces in the Eastern Theater. McClellan, he responded with little more than hesitation and delay. Lincoln's patience finally broke, because on 11th of March, 1862, he removed McClellan as General-in-Chief of the entire Union Army, leaving him in command only of the Potomac. And you can have the Army of Potomac, bud. Lincoln placed the broader strategic authority into the hands of Edwin Stanton. This decision created a deep and lasting breach between Stanton and McClellan. Supporters of the general accused Stanton of usurping the role of general-in-chief and claimed that the Secretary of War had no business exercising authority over military leaders. Just Secretary of fucking War. Who's the head of the General-in-Chief? Stanton is now, right?
It was McClellan, and then Lincoln gave Stanton his powers. Yeah.
All right. Well, Lincoln ignored them.
Lincoln's the head of the army altogether. So,
Right.
Well, Lincoln ignored them. He consolidated strategic power between himself and Stanton, trusting Stanton's energy and resolve far more than McClellan's caution. While this political storm swirled in Washington, McClellan prepared the first major offensive in the Eastern Theater. The Army of the Potomac began its move to Virginia Peninsula March 17th, launching what became known as the Peninsula Campaign. The operation opened at Yorktown. Lincoln urged McClellan to attack the town directly, but McClellan's inspection of the Confederate defenses had convinced him that a direct assault would be too costly. He opted instead to lay siege to the town. Washington officials erupted in frustration. To them, McClellan had abandoned another chance to strike a decisive blow. McClellan then requested reinforcements, specifically the 11,000 men of Major General William Franklin's division from Major General Irvin McDowell's corps. Stanton opposed the request. He wanted McDowell's corps kept together for a direct march on Richmond. But McClellan pressed the issue relentlessly.
Under political pressure and still trying to keep the offensive alive, old Stanton finally gave in. It was another moment that showed the widening distance. That divide only grew deeper as the campaign unfolded. Old McClellan's Peninsula Campaign. It dragged on for months. By June 1st, Confederate command shifted to General Lee, who immediately seized the initiative. Lee launched a series of sharp, aggressive attacks against the Army of the Potomac. By late 1862 in June, McClellan's men were only a few miles from Richmond. Yet the momentum had reversed. Meanwhile, Stanton ordered McClellan to transfer one of his corps east to help defend Washington. A combination of Confederate pressure and divided forces forced McClellan into a retreat toward Harrison's Landing. And this is where the old bluecoats, gunboats, provided protection along the James River. Good for them, man.
Back in Washington, the reaction is swift and brutal. The press and the public, they blamed Stanton for McClellan's failure. Earlier, April 3rd, Stanton had suspended military recruiting, believing that the Peninsula Campaign might end the war. But as McClellan fell back and the casualty list grew, the Union found itself desperately short of men. Stanton had no choice but to resume recruiting July 6th once McClellan's defeat was undeniable. But the damage to his reputation was severe. Newspapers, already furious over Stanton's tight restrictions on war correspondence, they turned their anger on him with renewed intensity. You don't want to allow us information on him. Well, they painted him as the chief obstacle to McClellan's success.
Oh.
The attack struck Stanton deeply.
Oh, damn.
He even considered resigning. He stayed only because Lincoln asked him to remain.
As losses mounted, Lincoln recognized that the Union's scattered commands in Virginia needed to be reorganized. He combined the forces of Major Generals Irvin McDowell, John C. Fremont, and Nathaniel P. Banks into the new Army of Virginia. And he placed that command under Major General John Pope, who had recently gained success in the Western Theater. Old Abe, he also saw that Army needed strong leadership at the top. The burden of acting as a de facto commanders, carried by Lincoln and Stanton together, had become impossible. The president needed a general-in-chief who could manage the war on a national scale and do it by himself. He chose, guess who? General Henry Halleck, a 134-year-old guy. Halleck reached Washington on July 22nd and was confirmed as general-in-chief the very next day. With Halleck's arrival, the Union High Command shifted once again. And Stanton, he moved into the next phase of the war that still refused to slow.
In the final days of August 1862, Robert E. Lee delivered another punishing blow to the Union. His army routed Major General John Pope at Manassas Junction in the Second Battle of Bull Run. The defeat shocked Washington once again. Old Halleck and Secretary Edwin Stanton both feared Lee would march straight into the capital. Instead, Lee turned north and opened the Maryland campaign. The campaign began September 4th with a skirmish at Mile Hill, followed by a major confrontation at Harper's Ferry. President Lincoln, acting without consulting Stanton, he folded Pope's battered Army of Virginia into McClellan's Army of the Potomac, so you guys are going to be one. Lincoln may have known Stanton would object, but for the moment he needed a commander who could get men into motion. And that was him, he says.
Right.
Yes.
Roughly 90.
What do you mean, a commander who could get men into motion? He's not talking about McClellan.
Right. Get the fuck out of here. Wow. Roughly 90,000 troops behind him. McClellan marched into the Battle of Antietam. The fighting along Antietam Creek became the single bloodiest day in American history. We've only said that 3,000 times. By the end, the Army of Northern Virginia pushed back into Virginia. Lee's first northern invasion halted. The victory inflated McClellan's confidence.
Yeah, it did.
He demanded that Lincoln stop obstructing his plan. See what I can do? Leave me alone. And he said, remove Halleck and Stanton and restore him as general-in-chief. Well, at the same time, he refused to even move aggressively against Lee,
exactly. See?
who was retreating toward Richmond. But his complaints continued. His inactivity continued. Lincoln's patience did not continue, because on the 5th of November, the president dismissed McClellan altogether, and Major Ambrose Burnside received command days later.
Major General, yeah. Burnside submitted a plan at Halleck's request. He proposed creating a diversion at Culpeper and Gordonsville while his main force seized Fredericksburg and then moved towards Richmond. Halleck relayed Lincoln's response on November 14th. He says, the president has just assented to your plan. He thinks that it will succeed if you move rapidly, otherwise not.
Right.
That result became the Battle of Fredericksburg, one of the Union's most lopsided defeats.
It's true.
Burnside's army was repulsed with heavy losses.
They were.
January 26, 1863, Major General Joseph Hooker, he replaced Burnside. Stanton, he didn't trust Hooker. Hooker had openly criticized Lincoln's administration and defied Burnside's authority. Stanton preferred Major General William Rosecrans, but Lincoln overruled him. As historians Benjamin Thomas and Harold Hyman explained, Lincoln chose Hooker because he had a reputation as a fighter and enjoyed popular support in the East. He's like, he might have been talking shit, but maybe he'll go out and actually do something.
Right. He's like, I don't give a fuck what he said about me. Well, Hooker spent months reorganizing the Army of the Potomac and lifting morale. His first major test, early May, Chancellorsville.
It's a good one.
This is where Lee ordered Thomas Stonewall Jackson on a daring flanking maneuver against Hooker's rear. Jackson's attack was executed with remarkable precision. When the fighting ended on May 6th, the Confederates claimed victory, and the Union counted 17,000 casualties. It was another blow in a war that still refused to yield, and Stanton, watching from Washington, he understood how far the road ahead remained. The defeat at Chancellorsville sent shockwaves through the North.
They all do.
And Edwin Stanton struggled to lift morale. His efforts were immediately undercut by reports that discipline inside the Army of the Potomac had deteriorated sharply under Joseph Hooker. Hooker's headquarters was described as a combination of barroom and brothel. Oh, wow. Hell of a headquarters. Stanton urged that liquor and women be barred from the camps in an attempt to restore order. Oh, you can't do that.
Can't do the liquor, at least, right? Meanwhile, Robert E. Lee moved north again, setting Washington on edge. By mid-June, troubling reports came from Hooker's own generals. Brigadier General Marsena Patrick, he wrote that Hooker acts like a man without a plan. It is entirely at loss what to do.
Oh, wow.
Or how to match the enemy. Or counteract his movements.
Oh, wow.
Like McClellan before him, Hooker consistently overestimated Lee's strength. He also complained that Lincoln's administration lacked confidence in him. June 27th, Hooker resigned. Stanton and Lincoln selected Major General George Meade this time as his replacement. Meade assumed command the next day, and he would stay in command throughout the whole war.
He would.
Oh, not as Major General of the whole army, but at least of the Potomac.
Right. Just days later, Meade and Lee collided at Gettysburg. The fighting began on the 1st of July, and on the 4th of July, news reached Washington that the Union had won a decisive victory and that Lee was retreating. Almost simultaneously, word arrived of General Grant's triumph at Vicksburg. What a blow to the old Confederates, huh? The twin victories electrified the North. Stanton even delivered a rare speech to an enormous crowd outside the War Department. But guess what, folks? That celebration did not last. Meade refused to strike Lee as the Army of Northern Virginia struggled across the flooded Potomac River. And on the 14th of July, Lee slipped back into Virginia unmolested. Lincoln and Stanton, for the first time in his life, Lincoln and Stanton furious at frickin' Meade. Like, what are you doing? Stanton wrote to a friend that Meade would continue to have his full support, though, but that since the world began, no man ever missed so great an opportunity of serving his country as was lost by his neglecting to strike his adversary.
I mean, I get it on one hand. He just fought a brutal fucking 3-day battle at Gettysburg.
Right.
Everybody's hurt, injured, tired.
Right.
But on the other hand, you got a chance.
They're both sides are fucking hurt. But he did also understand that Meade's caution came partly from the advice of Corps commanders who had previously outranked him. Don't man, you outranked them now.
As the Eastern Theater quieted, the West erupted. After 2 brutal days at Chickamauga in late September, Major General William Rosecrans and the Army of the Cumberland, they were trapped inside Chattanooga, surrounded by Braxton Bragg's forces. Rosecrans wired Washington, "We have met a serious disaster, extent not yet ascertained." The situation was dire. Charles Dana, Stanton's assistant secretary, he reported that Rosecrans might only hold out for maybe 15 to 20 more days, and that without another at least 20 to 25,000 reinforcements, Chattanooga would fall. Stanton organized the covert movement of thousands of U.S. troops or Union troops, west by rail. At the same time, Lincoln and Stanton agreed to give Grant command of nearly all Union forces in the West. Grant was then authorized to remove Rosecrans and replace him with Major General George Henry Thomas, which he certainly wanted to and did.
Fuck yeah. Gotta do it. Late November, Grant, supported by Thomas and Hooker, broke Bragg's siege at Chattanooga. Sherman, operating separately, failed to achieve his objective, but his presence forced Confederate Lieutenant General James Longstreet to abandon his attempt to besiege Burnside at Knoxville. Sherman's advance from Chattanooga compelled Longstreet to retreat, securing East Tennessee for the old Bluecoats. Under Stanton's direction, the war effort tightening, reorganizing, accelerating. The Union was beginning to gain the momentum it had long struggled to capture. Look at that shit.
By the spring of 1864, Grant had risen to lieutenant general and general-in-chief of all the armies. May 4th, he crossed the Rapidan River and began the relentless overland campaign. The next day, his army collided with Lee's forces in the tangled thickets of the Battle of the Wilderness. Fighting was savage and inconclusive. Grant refused to retreat. There will be no turning back, he told President Lincoln. It's a promise that set him apart from every other commander up until this point.
You ain't kidding.
Grant pressed on towards Richmond. He met Lee again at Spotsylvania Courthouse. The cost was staggering. Union losses dwarfed those of the Confederacy.
Wow.
Yet, didn't matter. Grant pushed forward, driving south until both armies fought again at Cold Harbor. There, Grant ordered repeated assaults across open ground and suffered heavy casualties once again. Even so, he continued to advance.
He said, "We ain't done, boys. These guys are reeling just like us." Wow. Mid-June, Grant executed one of the most impressive maneuvers of the war. He secretly shifted his entire army across the James River, a feat of engineering carried out with remarkable speed.
90,000 men, nobody even noticed.
Crazy. The move positioned him to strike Petersburg, the vital rail hub south of Richmond. But, once again, the attack failed.
Didn't matter.
With Confederate defenders entrenched and the element of surprise lost, Grant halted further frontal assaults. Both armies began digging in, boys. We're going to be here for a while. The siege of Petersburg began.
And winter has began. That means we're doing nothing.
Right. Thomas and Hyman described the scene. Long lines of parallel entrenchments curled south and east of Richmond as both armies dug in. Grant stabbed at Lee's fortifications, always keeping the pressure on, and at the same time probed westward, feeling for the railroads that brought Lee's supplies.
As armies fought on, the nation prepared for the 1864 election.
Poor Abe should have just went home.
Right. Lincoln, joined by his new running mate, Andrew Johnson, faced Democratic candidates George McClellan and George Pendleton. Yes, that McClellan.
Yeah.
When the results came in, Lincoln, he won decisively. It wasn't close. Republicans also carried key congressional and gubernatorial races in Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, and New York. Stanton played a significant role in securing these victories as well.
Nice.
Several days before the election, he ordered soldiers from crucial states, including Illinois, to be returned home to vote. Said, "Get your votes in, boys."
Yep.
And it's time, which could have been costly because McClellan was actually well liked by his men.
Was.
As Thomas and Hyman put it, the men who were doing the fighting had voted for more of it in order to make their efforts worthwhile.
Right.
Stanton also used the authority of the War Department to ensure Republican voters were not threatened or obstructed at the polls.
Jeez. According to Thomas and Hyman, Stanton's furlough orders and his careful handling of the wartime voting were central to the sweeping Republican successes of 1864. 3rd of March, 1865, the day before Abraham Lincoln's second inauguration, Ulysses S. Grant, he wired Washington with astonishing news. Robert E. Lee has sent representatives seeking terms of peace. Mm-hmm. Lincoln at first told Grant to secure peace by any means. Edwin Stanton immediately objected. He argued that it was the president's duty, not the general's, to negotiate peace. If the army took over that responsibility, Stanton warned the president would become little more than a figurehead. Lincoln shifted course at once. He's like, "You're right, son of a bitch."
Stanton, you dirty dog, you.
War could have been over a month before.
At the president's urging, Stanton, he sent Grant a firm directive. He was to quote-unquote have no conference with General Lee unless it be for the capitulation of General Lee's army or on some minor and purely military matter.
Also, basically, you can have whatever conversation he wants to.
Right. Grant, he was instructed not to decide, discuss, or confer upon any political questions. Such matters the president holds in his own hands and will submit them to no military conferences or conventions. Grant, of course, agreed without resistance.
I mean, well, he really had no choice.
Days later, Lincoln traveled to Grant's headquarters outside Petersburg. Siege, obviously still underway. When Major General Philip Sheridan, he returned from the Shenandoah. Grant prepared for his final push. April 1st, Sheridan crushed Lee's forces at the Battle of Five Forks. That forced a full retreat from Petersburg. Stanton, who had barely left the telegraph office during the fight, and sent word to his wife that evening. It said, "Petersburg is evacuated and probably Richmond. Put out your flags, my dear."
Oh. Wow. Stanton, he feared for Lincoln's safety. The president, he was lingering near the front to witness the final movements, and Stanton warned him of possible danger. Lincoln brushed aside the concern, but appreciated the sentiment. He said, "I'm in danger." He wrote Stanton, "It is certain now that Richmond is in our hands, and I think I will go there tomorrow." And on the 3rd of April, word reached Washington that Richmond had indeed fallen. The reaction, explosive. Thomas and Hyman described the capital. The news spread fast. People streaming from stores and offices speedily filled the thoroughfares. Cannons began firing, whistles tooted, horns blew, horse cars were forced to a standstill. The crowd yelled and cheered. Well, in Stanton, he was jubilant. He ordered candles placed in every War Department window. Bands played the Star-Spangled Banner. American flags covered the headquarters, including one with a bald eagle clutching a scroll reading Richmond.
Oh, they had that ready for a while, huh?
That'd be badass. What's that look like? That night, Stanton stepped outside and tearfully addressed the cheering crowd.
Lee, though, he had already slipped out of the city. Grant marched west, hammering Lee's retreating army. Telegraphs from Washington crackled with news of Union victories and the capture of thousands of Confederate prisoners. April 9, 1865, Lee surrendered. The war was over. April 13th, Stanton suspended conscription, recruiting, and all army procurement. For the first time in 4 years, the nation exhaled. April 14th, 1865, Abraham Lincoln invited Edwin Stanton, Ulysses S. Grant, and their wives to attend a performance at Ford's Theater the following evening. Lincoln asked Stanton to accompany him to the theater many times, and Stanton always declined. Neither Ellen Stanton nor Julia Grant would agree to go unless the other went. The Grants used a trip to see their children in New Jersey as their reason to decline. And Lincoln, unable to assemble his hope for party, eventually decided to attend with Major Henry Rathbone and Rathbone's fiancée. He's like, damn. That night, Stanton visited Secretary of State William Seward, who was bedridden from a recent carriage accident, and then went home. He went to bed about 10 p.m. Not long after, he heard his wife Ellen shout from downstairs, "Mr. Seward is murdered!" Stanton rushed down the stairs. When he heard that Lincoln might have also been attacked, he became instantly alert and ready to move. Someone warned him that a suspicious man had been seen near the house. Stanton ignored the warning, found a carriage, and hurried to Seward's residence. When he arrived, he learned the awful truth. Lincoln had been attacked. Stanton immediately ordered that all cabinet members and the vice president be placed under guard. Then he forced his way through the crowd at Seward's home and found the secretary unconscious in a blood-soaked third-floor room while a doctor worked over him. Seward's son, Frederick, had been struck down during the attack and left paralyzed. Secretary of the Navy, Gideon Welles, arrived moments before Stanton, and together they decided to go to Ford's Theater to reach the president. Quartermaster General Montgomery Meigs and Judge David Carter, they joined him as they traveled by carriage.
Wow. Lincoln, well, he had already been carried across the street to the Peterson house. Stanton found him there, stretched diagonally across the bed that was way too small for his body, surrounded by cabinet members, officers, and friends. Some later accounts claim that Stanton wept at the sight of the dying president. William Marvel, Lincoln's autocrat, he argues that Stanton's emotional detachment and firm demeanor made him invaluable as others succumbed to grief. Thomas and Hyman similarly noted that although death had always unsettled him before, Stanton now appeared calm, grim, decisive, and fully in control. He's probably like, all right, fuck this shit.
No use crying about it. 11 a.m., April 15th, Andrew Johnson, he was sworn in as president at the Kirkwood House. Stanton, who had intended to retire after the war, he now found himself the most powerful figure in the government.
Oh.
He controlled the army. Johnson was newly sworn, uncertain, and untested. Congress, they were out of session. For the moment, Stanton was effectively running the nation.
Wow.
He acted quickly. He ordered testimonies from the witnesses and identified the assassin as John Wilkes Booth. Stanton then placed every soldier in Washington on alert and locked down the city. Rail traffic to the south was stopped. Fishing boats on the Potomac were forbidden from landing. He summoned Grant back from New Jersey and requested assistance from the New York Police Department to support the federal detectives now scouring the region.
Dude, imagine just ending a 4-year war to keep a nation together, and then bam, your president's dead.
Gone.
Holy shit. Man. No wonder why we're pissed and always in a war.
Hey.
Captured conspirators, well, they were held under harsh conditions. They're waterboarded and all that good shit. Stanton ordered the lower deck of the monitor USS Montauk, anchored near the Washington Navy Yard. This was to serve as a prison for Lewis Powell, Michael O'Laughlin, Edmund Spangler, and George Atzerodt. Others, except Booth and Mary Surratt, they were aboard the USS Saugus. Prisoners on both vessels, well, kept in shackles at all times, bound by ball and chain. And their heads, they were covered with canvas hoods, that only a small opening for eating and breathing. Surratt remained at the old Capitol prison.
Booth, we know he was tracked to a barn in Virginia. Boston Corbett shot him, and he died shortly after. His body was then taken to Montauk. After an autopsy confirmed his identity beyond all doubt, Stanton ordered Booth buried in a secret, unmarked grave. You don't want no people coming to dig him up to celebrate.
Okay.
He refused to give the Confederacy a martyr. The surviving conspirators, they were tried, convicted, and all but three were hanged. In the aftermath of the nation's, including the first woman ever, Mary.
Mm-hmm.
In the aftermath of the nation's greatest tragedy, Stanton's iron resolve shaped the government's response from the first terrible moment to the final act of justice.
Look at this guy. Maybe he should have been president besides fucking Johnson's sorry ass. Evening, 21st April, 1865. Lieutenant General Grant tried to find Edwin Stanton at the War Department. This is when he learned Stanton was not there. He sent an urgent message to Stanton's home by courier. The news he carried could not wait. Major General William T. Sherman, now operating out of Raleigh, had negotiated a peace agreement with Confederate General Joseph Johnston, and Sherman had been given authority only to discuss military terms, just as Grant had been. But Sherman went far beyond those limits, as we all know. He openly admitted that he understood his instructions, yet the agreement he crafted stepped deep into political territory. It called not only for an end to all hostilities, but also for the recognition of the existing southern state governments once they swore allegiance to the United States. It reinstated federal courts in the rebel states, restored property and voting rights to former Confederates. Oh, wow. And he offered a blanket pardon to nearly all who had taken up arms. Even more alarming, it allowed Confederate troops to place their weapons into the custody of their state government.
Oh, no.
An arrangement that would effectively rearm the defeated South, right? The agreement even assigned the United States Supreme Court the task of resolving jurisdictional disputes within the southern states, a political function outside the court's constitutional authority. Oh, wow. Who is this guy?
All right. The courier reached Stanton's home breathless, interrupting his dinner. Stanton, in a state of high excitement, rushed to the War Department. He summoned the entire cabinet in the name of the president, and by 8 p.m., President Andrew Johnson, Grant, and the rest of the cabinet, along with Johnson advisor Preston King, were assembled. When Sherman's terms were read out loud, every person in the room condemned them.
Oh, they gasped all at once.
Right. Johnson directed Stanton to inform Sherman that the agreement was rejected in full, and that hostilities should be immediately resumed after giving the Confederates the 48 hours notice required to terminate the truce.
Right.
Grant, he was ordered to leave for Raleigh at once and deliver Stanton's directive, and if necessary, assume command of all Union forces.
Fuck yeah,
South.
holy shit.
He's the guy.
Sherman.
Stanton then moved to shape public opinion. He released Sherman's agreement to the press along with a forceful denunciation.
He didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
Well, I guess.
Stanton stated that Sherman had violated explicit orders from both Lincoln and Johnson.
Wow.
And listed 9 separate reasons the deal had been rejected. He also accused Sherman of inadvertently providing Jefferson Davis a potential escape route, including the gold and silver Davis was rumored to be carrying away from Richmond.
And this is a guy who basically destroyed Georgia and South Carolina.
Stanton based this charge on Sherman's withdrawal of Major General George Stoneman's cavalry from the Greensboro Railway, which is the same route Davis and the Confederate officials were reportedly using to flee. Oh, my. Was he in cahoots?
Oh, wow. Stanton's statement, well, it was devastating. Thomas and Hyman observe it, and they say, it amounted to a castigation of Sherman and virtually accused him of disloyalty. Wow. Sherman was one of the most respected generals in the United States. Stanton's public rebuke put the general's standing in administration at genuine risk. Well, Stanton, he believed that Sherman had endangered the Union victory itself and acted with the same unyielding resolve he had shown throughout the war. Unaware of Stanton's public denunciation, William Sherman, well, he sent Stanton a conciliatory letter. He admitted that his agreement with Johnson and Breckinridge might have been folly, though he still believed the terms were sound. He's like, if we want to keep peace, we're basically saying, hey, man, let's just go back to how we were 4 years ago. That's what Sherman was saying. Even so, Sherman recognized that it was not his place to challenge his superiors, and he assured Stanton that he would obey the new orders. We should have obeyed in the first fucking place.
Didn't matter, though, because the situation was already unraveling. At Grant's request, Major General Henry Halleck, he sent instructions to several of Sherman's subordinates, directing them to move their forces into North Carolina regardless of Sherman's orders.
Oh.
Halleck then issued another dispatch telling Sherman's generals to disregard Sherman entirely.
Oh.
When Sherman read Halleck's message and then saw Stanton's explosive statement in the newspapers, his fury erupted.
Oh.
Sherman believed Stanton had smeared him before the entire nation. Of course.
Right.
He wrote to Grant, I respect Stanton's office, but I cannot him personally.
Oh.
Till he undoes this injustice of the past. His brother, Senator John Sherman, he thought the general deserved censure for overstepping his authority, but still deserved fair treatment.
He's like, little bro.
Fucked up. Sherman and his wife's influential Ewing family demanded that Stanton publicly retract his accusations. Stanton, in characteristic fashion, he said, no. Nope. As the federal government prepared for a grand review of the armies in late May, Halleck invited Sherman to stay at his home. He said, don't you come.
Sherman bluntly said no. In a letter to Grant, he wrote that he would accept no orders from Stanton unless they were explicitly sanctioned by the president himself. Sherman insisted that no apologies, no retraction, nor any soft explanation would be enough. The only thing that would satisfy him would be Stanton naming himself a common libeler. Sherman also added, I will treat Mr. Stanton with like scorn and contempt. Unless you have reasons otherwise, for I regard my military career as ended. Save and accept so far as necessary to put my army into your hands. And Sherman kept his word. During the grand review, he saluted the president and Grant, but when it came to Stanton, he walked right past him in full view of the public without even offering a handshake. Stanton remained motionless. Journalist Noah Brooks wrote, Stanton's face, never very expressive, remained immobile.
He's like, fuck you. Well, that public slight triggered immediate speculation that Stanton would resign. He considered it, but Andrew Johnson and many others, including senior officers, urged him to remain in office. Sherman's wife later tried to mend the rift by bringing flowers to the Stanton home and visiting Ellen Stanton. The general's resentment lingered. Under the surface, the wound never fully healed. The war was over, but Edwin, he faced a new enormous responsibility after this, though. He had to reshape the whole American military establishment so that it would be as capable in peace as it had proven in war.
Right.
And now you got to deal with international stuff. In the North, he reorganized the army into 2 distinct sections. One handled training and ceremonial functions. The other, they were tasked with suppressing the old Indians in the West. Many of whom had grown agitated during the chaos of the Civil War.
Right.
They probably wanted the Civil War to keep going on because they knew as soon as that was over, then they're coming after us.
Mm. Well, in the South, the challenge, even greater. The collapse of the Confederate government had created a vacuum of power Stanton believed the region required firm, organized military oversight to restore stability, which it did. I mean, come on. Can't just remove all troops and be like, go back to business as usual.
Right. And not only that, you had to, like we've seen in all these other guys' stories, you had to stop the old whites down there from preventing black people from voting and doing things.
He presented a proposal for military occupation that had already received the backing of Lincoln before his death. Under Stanton's plan, 2 military governments would be established in Virginia and North Carolina, each supported by provost marshals who would enforce laws, maintain order, and provide the structure that the war-torn states desperately needed. These marshals had proven remarkably effective in the final weeks of the conflict. Yeah, see? Nice little plan there, huh? Oh, President Johnson, at the cabinet's first meeting on the 15th of April, he promised to continue the reconstruction plans Lincoln had discussed. And on 29th of May, 1865, Johnson issued 2 proclamations. One, it appointed William Woods Holden as provisional governor of North Carolina. The other offered pardons to most individuals who had participated in the rebellion, provided they swore loyalty to the United States once again. And they also accepted that all federal laws regarding slavery, including the end of institution itself. Oh. So, hey, man, you just respect our laws and...
you can come back.
Right.
And many of you will even take place in our government once again.
Right.
Johnson also recognized Francis Harrison Pierpont's loyal government in Virginia, as well as the reconstructed governments in Arkansas, Louisiana, and Tennessee, which were all created under Lincoln's 10% plan. He extended that plan to several additional southern states, signaling a reconstruction policy far more lenient than what Stanton had envisioned.
All right.
As the nation took its first steps into an uncertain peace, it became clear that the struggle ahead would be political rather than military. And Stanton once again found himself at the center of the storm. In his 1865 message to Congress, President Johnson argued that the only proof of loyalty required from a former Confederate state was ratification of the 13th Amendment. You gotta allow the end of slavery, guys.
Yep.
Congressional Republicans, they weren't convinced, though.
Nope.
Senator Charles Sumner and Representative Thaddeus Stevens, they insisted that black suffrage was essential. Well, that's for rights to vote, right?
Right.
Essential for not only national security, but also for the continued dominance of the Republican Party. Republicans moved swiftly, using procedural tools. They blocked Southern delegates, many of them former Confederate officials, from even taking their seats. They then created a joint congressional committee dominated by Republicans to oversee all Reconstruction policy. Yeah, they're like, we're not trusting any of these Democrats.
I still think it's hilarious, though, that they allowed former fucking Congress guys to come back.
You gotta do what you gotta do.
I guess.
You still need representation in the South.
That's true. It's crazy stuff, man. A deep divide soon opened between the president and Congress. Johnson refused to abandon his lenient amnesty policy, even as it drew fierce criticism. Meanwhile, congressional Republicans increasingly favored Stanton's proposal. He had a proposal that was firm military occupation of the South. It's a good proposal. Johnson's remaining support among moderate Republicans evaporated after horrifying anti-black riots in Memphis and New Orleans happened. Public sentiment turned sharply against him. 1866 congressional elections delivered a crushing blow to President Johnson. Republicans won enormous gains, capturing more than 2/3 of the seats in both the House and the Senate. With that new power, some Republicans pushed for Johnson's removal. They crafted the tenure of office bill with Stanton specifically in mind. Johnson had long considered dismissing Stanton and replacing him with William Sherman. Wow. The tenure of office bill would make such a move illegal without Senate approval, which Stanton was virtually guaranteed to receive from the Republican majority. And Johnson vetoed the bill, of course, but Congress overrode the veto on the same day. They're like,
I don't think so, bud.
It was all formality.
Well, now protected by law, Stanton became more openly combative towards Johnson. He said, now do something, bitch.
Right.
Tensions escalated and Johnson grew increasingly frustrated. He confided to Grant that he intended to remove Stanton and offer Grant the position of Secretary of War. Grant refused. He argued that the Tenure of Office Act protected Stanton, and he warned the president that if he violated that law, public opinion would turn even more sharply against the administration.
Yeah.
Secretary of State William Seward, who continued to admire Stanton, he agreed.
I mean, Johnson was such a piece of shit, dude. Yeah. Wow.
For a moment, Johnson hesitated, but support from Secretary of the Navy Gideon Welles and Chief Justice Salmon Chase stifled his resolve. Welles had described Stanton as selfish, insincere, a dissembler, and treacherous. Chase, formerly Stanton's friend, he had distanced himself for political reasons.
Right.
With their encouragement, Johnson acted. August 12, 1867, he sent Stanton a brief but blunt note. He was suspended from office and ordered to turn over the War Department's files and authority to Grant.
Oh, wow.
Johnson also notified the Senate as required by the Tenure of Office Act. Stanton, though furious, he complied with little resistance. For the first time since Lincoln appointed him, Stanton was out of power. But the battle between Stanton and the president only began in...
I bet. Wow. 13th of January, 1868. The Senate voted overwhelmingly to reinstate Stanton as Secretary of War. And Grant's like, what the fuck's going on here? Well, Grant, fearful of violating the Tenure of Office Act and its penalty of 10,000 and 5 years in prison, and mindful of his near certain nomination as Republican presidential candidate.
That's what he was more concerned about. He didn't give a shit about the prison because he never would have won.
He immediately surrendered the office back to Stanton. So Stanton returned to the War Department in what newspapers described as unusually fine spirits and chatting casually. His return set off a wave of congratulatory letters and public support from across the whole North, praising his defiance of the widely disliked President Andrew Johnson. Well, Johnson, meanwhile, he resumed the search for someone who might replace Stanton. What a piece. He ain't getting reelected. After several weeks of frustration, he appeared to accept Stanton's reinstatement with resignation. He did what he could to weaken Stanton's authority, frequently disregarding War Department decisions. Even so, Stanton's ability to sign Treasury warrants and his strong congressional backing left him with considerable power still.
Yeah, Johnson soon became focused on engineering Stanton's final removal. Jeez. As William Marvel writes, no longer able to bear the congressional insult of an enemy imposed on his official family, Johnson, he began to ponder removing Stanton outright and replacing him with someone palatable enough to win Senate approval. Johnson, he turned to General Lorenzo Thomas, the Army's adjutant general, who agreed to serve as secretary ad interim. February 21st, Johnson formally informed Congress that he was dismissing Stanton and appointing Thomas in his place. Stanton, acting on the urging of Republican senators, he refused to yield his office.
Right.
That night, Senate Republicans pushed through a resolution declaring Stanton's removal illegal, despite fierce Democratic resistance. In the House of Representatives, a resolution to impeach Johnson was then introduced. And February 24th, the House voted 126 to 47 along strict party lines to impeach the president. So only 47 Democrats.
Wow, Johnson's trial began late March. Senate dominated by Republicans. Many assumed conviction was all but assured. But as the proceedings unfolded, several senators grew reluctant to remove a sitting president, no matter what. Meanwhile, Stanton barricaded himself inside the War Department for weeks. He ain't leaving that shit. He occasionally slipped home to check on his family, though. When it became apparent that Johnson would not attempt to physically remove him, Stanton gradually resumed a more normal routine. He watched the trial closely, convinced the Senate would convict. But when the vote came to tally, 35 for conviction, 19 for acquittal. One vote short of 36 required for removal.
Oh wow.
The remaining charges were postponed while the National Republican Convention met. On the 26th of May, after Johnson had been acquitted on all remaining counts, Stanton, he submitted his resignation.
After 6 turbulent years in wartime and Reconstruction, Stanton's battle with the old president ended not with his removal by force, but with his own resolute decision to walk away. After Johnson's acquittal and Stanton's resignation, the administration moved quickly to reshape the public story. Johnson's allies cast those who supported impeachment as villains, with Stanton portrayed as the darkest among them. But outside the White House, Stanton's standing remained strong. He left office with overwhelming support from the public and the Republican Party. Privately, though, Stanton, he was in trouble. Years of exhausting wartime labor and unrelenting post-war strain had ravaged his health. His finances, they were no better. What is up with these guys?
Right.
After leaving the War Department, Stanton had little left beyond the remainder of his salary and a $500 loan.
Wow.
Why? Friends urged him to run for the United States Senate, but he refused. He preferred to step away from politics altogether and return to his law.
Yeah, go make some money, motherfucker.
Right.
Shit. His attempt to resume legal work, well, that didn't last long. August 1868, Robert Shank, the Republican candidate for a House seat in Ohio, called on Stanton for his help. Shank's opponent, Clement Vallandigham, a Democrat notorious among Republicans for his copperhead politics. Stanton, he despised Vallandigham. He believed that placing Democrats in power, even at the local level, jeopardized the results of the war and threatened to undo the Republican achievements he had fought so hard to protect. Well, you can't become a one-party nation, bud. Despite his failing health, Stanton agreed to campaign. He toured Ohio on behalf of Schenck and other Republican candidates, and Ulysses S. Grant, the party's presidential nominee. But the speaking tours taxed him heavily. His asthma, lifelong and persistent, was aggravated by long speeches and travel. His physician warned him, stop. By early November, Stanton, he was forced to return to Washington, weakened and visibly ill. The exhaustion briefly gave way to excitement when the election results came in and the Republicans had defeated Vallandigham and Grant. He won the presidency. For Stanton, the victories offered a moment of profound relief. The Union he had worked tirelessly to preserve would now be led by a president he trusted, and the movements he had sacrificed his health for remained firmly in control. But, body failing, even triumph could not turn back what years of war and service had carved into him.
After the elections, Stanton returned briefly to law again. He took on a major case in the Pennsylvania federal courts involving contested lands in West Virginia, property that was worth millions of dollars because of its timber and coal.
Timber and coal.
By this time, his illness unmistakable. Stanton had grown so weak that court documents had to be brought directly to his home because he couldn't even reliably travel. The lower court ruled against his client, but Stanton appealed to the United States Supreme Court, and he won a remand, forcing the case back to the federal bench.
Hey.
It would be one of his last professional triumphs. By Christmas, he was so frail he could not descend the staircase of his home.
Oh.
The family gathered in his bedroom to celebrate the holiday.
Oh, wow. That sucks.
Many in Washington believed that Grant, who had kept his distance from Stanton for months, now intended to reward him for his loyal campaigning during the election. But Stanton, he insisted otherwise.
Nope.
He had no interest in serving again. Ohio Congressman Samuel Shellabarger, he says he has not a great while to live and must devote that to his family.
Come on.
As the new year began, Stanton quietly prepared for the possibility of death. When spring came, his condition improved. He regained enough strength to appear at congressional inquiry. Speculation once more arose that Grant might choose to honor him with a prestigious post. Some believe Stanton, he'd be an excellent ambassador to England. Just send him overseas.
Right. Let him do 3 months on a boat.
Right.
Where all the diseases linger. Jeez. Grant, he thought differently, though. He offered Stanton the diplomatic mission to Mexico. A respectable but less coveted position. Stanton said, nah, I'm good. His health remained unpredictable still, and his family needed him more than any government row ever could. In those months, the once formidable war secretary fought a final private battle. His mind was sharp still. His determination remained unbroken. But that pesky body, worn down by the war and the years that followed, could no longer match the force of his will. Stanton's health rose and fell throughout 1869. Some days he had strength. Others, bedridden. Late in that very year of 1869, Congress created a new associate justice seat on the United States Supreme Court. And for the first time in months, Stanton felt a renewed sense of purpose. You can sit on a court, right? He decided he would pursue the appointment. He said, fuck it. Unable to lobby directly, he turned to someone who could, Bishop Matthew Simpson. He was a close friend of Ulysses S. Grant. Simpson pressed Stanton's case with the president, assuring Grant that Stanton's legal brilliance and unshakable loyalty made him an ideal fit for the Supreme Court.
Grant, though, he had other plans. December 15th, day earlier, 14th, 1869, he instead nominated Attorney General Ebenezer Hoare to fill the seat.
Why would you not? I can see wanting to give it to that guy, but if a president only gets to assign Supreme Court justices not very often. And for Grant to do one that's going to die in 2 weeks,
right?
I ain't wasting a pick on that, motherfucker.
Well, you can just pick a new one.
That's true.
The next day, though, Associate Justice Robert Cooper Grier announced his resignation. Effective February 1st, 1870, the new vacancy immediately opened, and Stanton's supporters moved quickly. Petitions urging Grant to appoint Stanton to the court circulated through both the House and the Senate, gathering signatures across party lines. They were delivered to the White House December 18th. December 19th, Stanton's 55th birthday. Grant and Vice President Schuyler Colfax, they went to Stanton's home in person. Grant informed him he would be nominated to succeed Justice Grier.
55, dude. That's just sad.
It was a moment Stanton had long hoped for, and one that brought visible relief to a man worn down by years of public service.
Grant submitted a nomination to the Senate December 20th. Senate confirmed on that very same day.
Oh, why can't they do that nowadays?
46-11, right. Next morning, Stanton sent his formal letter of acceptance, but the strain of the previous years had finally taken its toll. Edwin Stanton dies before he could even take the oaths required to assume the office of Associate Justice. He remains the only confirmed Supreme Court nominee in American history to accept the appointment, but die before even joining the court. For Stanton, it was a final, poignant reminder of how completely the Civil War had consumed him, body, spirit, and life, long after the guns themselves had fallen silent. And on the night of the 23rd of December 1869, Edwin Stanton complained of sharp pains in his head, neck, and spine. His physician, Surgeon General Joseph Barnes, summoned to the house. Stanton's asthma, which had troubled him his entire life, made breathing difficult. His lungs were tight. His heart labored. His wife and kids remained close at his bedside while Barnes monitored his condition. Around midnight, Stanton seemed to improve.
The old get better before you die.
Right. And then suddenly, as William Marvel notes, he began gasping so strenuously for air that someone ran for the pastor of the Church of Epiphany. The pastor did arrive very quickly, and moments later, Stanton lost consciousness. And about 3 a.m. on 24th of December, 1869, Edwin McMaster Stanton, dead, 55 years old.
Well,
Wow.
his body placed in a black coffin inlaid with linen and set in his second-floor bedroom. President Grant wished to hold a full state funeral, but Ellen Stanton requested a simpler service.
Right.
Grant honored her wishes, but he also ordered all public offices closed and draped federal buildings in mourning. Flags in major cities were lowered to half-staff. Gun salutes echoed across army posts from one end of the country to the other. December 27th, artillerymen carried Stanton's body downstairs to the parlor. The funeral had drew nearly every prominent figure in Washington. President Grant and Vice President Colfax, they attended, I would assume. The cabinet was there, along with the entire Supreme Court, senators, representatives, generals, and other officials who had known him throughout the long years of war. After the eulogy, Stanton's casket was placed on a caisson and drawn by 4 horses to Oak Hill Cemetery. The procession stretched a mile, a solemn line through the heart of the Capitol he had defended so fiercely.
Look at that shit. Wow. Stanton is buried beside his young son, James Hutchison Stanton, who died in infancy years before. Cabinet members, generals, judges, and senators lifted the coffin and carried it to its final resting place. One of Stanton's old professors from Kenyon College delivered the graveside service. A 3-volley salute rang out over the cemetery, marking the end of the ceremony. For the man who had carried the Union through its darkest years, the nation answered with one last act of honor. Edwin Stanton left the world on Christmas Eve in 1869, but the nation he helped preserve continued to remember him. Because in 1871, he became only the second American ever, other than a president, to appear on a United States postage stamp. The first, Benjamin Franklin, 1847. The Stanton stamp, a 7-cent issue released on the 6th of March, 1871.
7 cents?
That's crazy.
That's a lot of money.
If I can get it. It was the only stamp produced by the post office that very year.
Oh.
It paid the single rate for letters sent from the United States to several European nations.
That's why. Had to go across seas.
Yeah.
Stanton's face had also appeared on American currency.
What?
1890 and 1891, the Treasury issued a series of engraved treasury notes, or coin notes, that collectors they still prize today.
Okay, that'd be cool.
Many consider them among the finest examples of American engraving. The $1 Stanton note of 1890, known as the Fancy Back, is especially famous, with an estimated 900 to 1,300 surviving out of the millions originally printed.
Right.
It ranks number 3 in Bowers and Sonman's 100 Greatest American Currency Notes.
83.
I said 83, right?
No, I said 3.
Whatever. Stanton also appeared, it's third in the 80s. Stanton also appeared on the 4th issue of fractional currency in the amount of 50 cents.
Oh.
Across the country, landmarks and institutions, they bear his name. Stanton Park in Washington, located four blocks from the Capitol. Stanton College Preparatory School in Jacksonville. A steam engine built in 1862 was christened the E.M. Stanton during the Civil War to honor the new Secretary of War. Stanton County, Nebraska carries his name. So does Stanton Middle School in Hammondsville, Ohio.
In Pittsburgh, Stanton Heights, and its main thoroughfare, Stanton Avenue. Washington, D.C., both Stanton Park and Fort Stanton. Oh, Philly. They once had an Edwin Stanton Elementary School. Trenton, New Jersey, had a street named after him. Even his son, Edwin L. Stanton, who served as Secretary of District of Columbia, he has a school named in his honor, the Edwin L. Stanton Elementary School in Washington, D.C.
Awesome.
Wow. That was so cool. This ain't about his son. Stanton's legacy has never been simple, but always powerful. To the soldiers who watched the Union survive 4 brutal years, he was the iron backbone of the war. The man who turned a disordered War Department into one of the most efficient military machines the country has ever seen. To Lincoln, he was both adversary and indispensable. A fierce administrator whose unyielding resolve helped push the war toward victory. To the public, well, he was the cabinet officer who never wavered when the Union's fate hung by a thread.
His critics, though, they saw him differently. Obviously, they're critics.
Right.
Some thought him harsh, uncompromising, too willing to use the tools of war in moments of peace.
Yeah.
His clashes with generals, his stormy relationship with Johnson, and his unbending drive made him one of the most polarizing figures of his age. But even those who disliked him rarely questioned his loyalty to the Republic or the scale of the burden he carried.
Oh, wow.
Today, historians tend to view Stanton as one of the most consequential secretaries of war in American history. His organizational genius, his relentless energy, and his determination to preserve the Union place him at the center of nearly every major decision of the conflict. Without Stanton's discipline and force of will, the nation's path to victory, or the North's path to victory, would almost certainly have been slower and far more uncertain. Stanton's life was not gentle, neither was his legacy. But in the long sweep of the Civil War, he remains a figure who shaped events at a level few ever reach. He was the administrator who refused to bend, the guardian of the Capitol when Lincoln fell, and the man who carried the Union across its darkest threshold. History remembers him not because he was beloved, but because the nation he fought for still stands.
Fuck yeah. Here's to you, Edwin Stanton.
We need an eagle screech
Right.
after that one. Hey, Edwin Stanton. That was a long one. Good for him. Did some good things.
Yeah, finally a good guy. Shit.
Right.
When's the last time we had a good guy?
John Reynolds probably was the last one.
Right.
Yeah, that's about it. Who else before that?
Fremont, maybe?
No. Definitely not.
No,
John
not
Fremont. That's about it.
Oh, wow.
Who was that? Maybe George Thomas.
Maybe Earl Van Dorn.
He's a Confederate. He can't be good.
Well, of course you can.
I don't think it was Earl Van Dorn, though. I think it was George Thomas, maybe. He was decent.
All right.
Winfield Scott wasn't bad. I mean, he didn't do nothing stupid.
Yeah, he was all right.
That's Edwin Stanton. Next week, we'll flip it back over to the Confederate side with their first and only vice president of the Confederate States, which is Alexander Hamilton Stevens. So he's got a decent little life story as well. That's probably going to be a long one, just like the Stanton one was. But yeah, for that, with enough talking, this is literally an hour and a half, probably more. So yeah, we'll see you next week. Subscribe, like, comment, share with your friends, all the other good stuff. And we'll see you for more Battles of the American Civil War, Behind the Battles, where the mother music ends.